We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for everyone that's joined. We've got a great group and a great presentation for you. So we will jump in and get started. And again, reminder for those that have just joined, please get your questions answered in the Q&A box. We're going to have a great time going through and answering those throughout this session. So today we are going to be talking with Greg Daines, who is the CEO of ChurnRX, also known as the Churn Whisperer, the Churn Doctor. He is the leading expert when it comes to customer churn. So we're thrilled to have him answering our questions today on customer churn. We've posted this out to the masses on LinkedIn and our audiences, and there was an overwhelming response around customer retention strategies. And in fact, the votes we received, there were 200 plus votes on what are the best customer retention strategies for fighting churn. And so Greg has graciously actually prepared a short presentation on some 3 things that we can do to hit those strategies and start fighting churn. So Greg, to answer that question, I will turn it over to you and we'll get started.
All right, terrific. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I mean, the interest in this question actually didn't surprise me. I mean, everybody's dealing with it. Everybody's looking for what can we do about it, and not only what could we do about it, but what practical thing can I actually do right now today that will actually make a difference? And that's the tough one, right? But it turns out there are actually fewer strategies than people think that are fundamentally effective at driving higher retention and reducing churn. And I'm going to share by far the 3 most effective. And the great thing about this, and the thing that I think is so important, is these are things you can do right now, right after we get off this call. So not only am I going to show you quickly how you do them, but I'm also going to give you my templates and my decks and everything that I use to essentially be able to put this into practice right away. I do want to say that I'm going to take some time to do this, but I want to leave time for questions. There are other questions that came up that are really interesting, and I want to get to them. And I want your questions as you listen to this, as things come up. Matt's going to look at your questions. We're going to make sure we try to get to as many of them as possible. So please post those in the Q&A. And here we go. Okay, so I'm going to just share a few slides. Here's the winning vote. So these are the 3 retention strategies. Look, in order to make sense out of these, I have to explain just a couple things. But the first one is everything we know about churn and retention points to the fundamental factor being customer results. We know, obviously, that at this point, it's overwhelmingly clear that customer satisfaction and delight and happiness does not drive retention, that the thing that drives retention is producing customer results. Well, this is actually great news. Why? Well, among other things, one, we have a lot more control over customer results than we do over satisfaction, over the emotional experience of our customers. So that's good news, but it's a lot more than that, because there are only so many things that get in the way of customers getting good results. And anything that's going to be effective, anything that we're going to do that's going to make a difference in churn and retention is going to be about unblocking the ability of the customer to get results, or enabling them to get results. Okay, so in order to explain that, I really want to show you how few factors actually there really are in churn. We think of them as being just widely variant, but it's really not true. The dominant theme in churn is about results. That means the dominant factors are limited to that. So one way to think about it is this, and in fact, I'm going to show you there are only really 6 key drivers of churn. 6 key things that get in the way of customers achieving good results. And you should know, customers who achieve good results far and away stay longer than anyone else. It's so long that it essentially makes churn irrelevant. Okay, so then how do we unpack this? And the best way to unpack it, the way I like to do it, is to be able to go in reverse, right? Our normal approach is to say, what's the customer journey, right? We're the first touch and the first experience, and optimize each one as they go. And that's perfectly fine if what you're doing is producing an experience. But if what you're doing is primarily engineered for producing customer results, measurable results, then in a way, it's better to start at the end, the results, and work backward, right? What comes back from that? And so One of the most interesting things about this approach is it allows us to see all the elements that we need to put in place. And those, in fact, are actually the same as the primary drivers of churn. Let me explain. Well, one thing we know is that customers who've achieved results tend to stay and expand. And in fact, for customers who stay a really long time, the expansion is a key factor. It's not just enough to produce results. We know that customers who stay many years, who stay essentially indefinitely, are the customers who find on some regular basis some reason to look forward to more results in the next period than they had in the last period. And one way to think about that is, look, customers don't really renew because of what you did. If you think about it, they've already paid you for that, right? It's essential to achieve, right, what results they expected. But what they're looking forward to in a renewal is, should I continue? What's in the future? What's in it for me? And so on some basis, you do need to offer and create a sense of improvement, a sense of advancement, more, better results, more results, whatever. So for the longest, like the last step, if you can get customers to expand, they stay. Well, obviously, also you need results. Those are the two kind of key factors in high retention. Produce results and show them what's next. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so why do customers get results? Well, fundamentally, the customers who get results are the ones who change their behavior to take advantage of the way your solution, your offering produces value, right? And so that's interesting, right? You think about all the customers you've had come through, some do really well and some don't. What's the difference? Fundamentally, the difference is that the customers who change are the ones who are able to take advantage of these improvements that this solution, this offering installs, puts into their life, engineers for them. And that if you don't do those changes, if you don't make any change in how you operate, you work the same as you did before, you're likely to get pretty much the same results you had before. There's not much to brag about. There's not much to be excited about. It's not going to be worth it. Right. And so actually the fundamental driver of customer results is behavior change. And so, okay, we've got to get customers to change how they work. Well, what drives that? Well, for one thing, they have to have the solution. It's not like the solution doesn't matter. It's not like the technology is irrelevant. It's extraordinarily important. It's just that it's irrelevant unless they also change. But one other potential problem, right, is that they don't actually have the right solution in place. Maybe they bought the wrong version, or maybe they don't have other elements of the solution beyond your offering that are critical to get the results. They have to have everything in place. They also have to have a sense as to why they're doing it. One reason why customers don't change, and we see this all the time, is that they don't really understand why it's important. How could that happen? If they've already bought your solution, surely they understand. Well, no. It's possible someone else bought it and handed it down to them, and that they've just been assigned to do this. You've seen that before, and their motivation is extremely low. They're not going to be, invested in making important and difficult behavior changes if they don't understand what's in it for them. That's one reason. But all the time, actually, we get customers who come through who know it's important, but haven't really thought through carefully. And so actually, fundamentally, what the strategy is about is ensuring they know exactly what the benefit is, how it will be measured, when they should expect results, how much results they should expect. That level of clarity is actually missing from a lot of customers. Now, some customers have it, right? They come in, they got it all in their mind. They know what they're doing. They're prepared for behavior change, everything like that. But are all our customers like that? Obviously not. And frankly, that's a big difference. So for a customer that's prepared like that, great, they're solid. But unfortunately, that's a very small minority of our customers. The vast majority of them do not come prepared with that level of clarity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so they need a strategy. The last thing they need is actually, and this one kind of is obvious, but it has to be said, right? That the last thing they need for sure is some sense as to whether they can even win, right? Whether this is even the solution that can produce value for them. Do they even have the use case that matches this? Now, that's obviously really important. We're not going to deal much with that today, but it's obviously really important. And one of the biggest drivers of churn across the industry is bad fit customers. And how does that happen? That's a whole separate topic, but it's very important. Okay, so these are the 6 drivers of churn, in the sense that you can look at them as underlying them is the problem to be solved to eliminate that style of churn. Okay, so obviously, if they're a bad fit, that's a problem. Customers not clear on what success looks like, then they lack a strategy, what I call a strategy. They don't understand with enough clarity what they're up to and how they'll know they've won, et cetera. I mean, how many times have I gone to a customer with results and they look at them and go, they didn't know those were the results they should be looking for. There wasn't clarity. The mistake was not to establish from the beginning or at some point what it is. This is all about how it'll be measured, et cetera. Do they have all the right pieces in the solution? Are they making the necessary behavior changes to win? Are we measuring and materializing those results back to them? Is it clear that when they are winning, or if they're not winning, why that is? And then do they have the ability to add and expand and improve their results over time? Okay, so these are the main drivers of churn. I'm not going to dwell on this a lot today, but if you think about it, everything that matters to engineering a successful long-term outcome is on here. Okay, and so I promised 3 strategies. What's that about? Well, the 3 strategies are essentially how we take down almost all these issues. We're not going to deal with fit because let's assume for the moment that we're all dealing with customers who are already customers and we're not solving for whether or not they're buying. So we'll take that off the table. What you end up with is 3 ways fundamentally quickly to address these issues. The first is what I call the customer results strategy. Does the customer have a clearly defined what it is this is about, what success looks like, how it will be measured, when and how much results they can expect, and then what they'll have to do to achieve that. This is the most powerful thing you can do in customer retention, because solving for this set of factors, which are upstream of the churn and the retention, solving for these addresses the vast majority of the reasons why customers fail and leave. The vast majority. And so we're going to dwell for a minute on this strategy. The second one is measure and materialize. It won't matter if they get results if they aren't actually aware of them, if they can't actually see that materializing. So M&M is my shorthand for this playbook. Very straightforward. We're going to talk about that one. And then the last one is the what's next strategy. Right? We're here, we've achieved something. What's in it for me to renew? What can I look forward to? What will I be bragging about next year to my boss, et cetera? Okay, so those are the 3 strategies. We're going to take them in turn. And again, fire off your questions. I'm going fast because I really want to save time for all the questions. Okay. So first one, customer result strategy. It's simple. We just need to be clear with customers. What's the result they want? How will it be measured? Do they have all the pieces? And what will they have to do to achieve it? So we've created this simple template, and we've taught this to hundreds and hundreds of CSMs. It's incredible how quickly you can master this simple thing. And it's not that it's radically different than any other customer strategy you've seen, except for in one way. And I think this is really important. Anyone could, and I've seen really terrific versions of this many times where people sit down and they write down a strategy and they think it all through. They present that to the customer. It's actually really effective. The problem with it is it takes too much time. I can't do that at scale with a lot of customers. And so the question is there a much more condensed version I can do in a matter of a few minutes with a customer that can clarify all these elements and put me in a position to influence their behavior change? And the answer is this, and it's incredibly easy to use and it's incredibly fast. So there are no paragraphs, there are no even real sentences here. What we're trying to do is just identify with clarity between us and the client customer, what is it they're trying to do and how will they get there? So first, the key result. What's the key business benefit, the key outcome they're looking for that will matter? And it matters that this be defined specifically enough so that we can later anticipate showing them the outcome, right? It can't be vague. It can't be, I'll feel better about life, right? We've got to get something clear enough and important enough that not only can we measure and materialize the outcome, but that it will matter to somebody. And the reason that's important is because behavior change is hard. The whole point of this is to motivate the right behavior change to get customers to change in ways that lead to results, et cetera. Well, I can get them to change if it isn't important. So we've got to find something that's important and specific. Okay, so I've got an example on here. The client is trying to increase their email list size, whatever. That's the business that we're in this scenario. Okay, fair enough. The next question, how will we know when you've won? What will the measurement be, right? Okay, so in this case, it's growth in list size. It doesn't matter all that much, the example I'm using, but you get the point. It isn't enough to know what result it is, because if we can't measure it, and if we don't agree now on how to be measured, there's no guarantee at all that when we get there, they'll be satisfied enough and have a sense of accomplishment enough that it will have, produce that momentum going forward. Okay, so what's the measurement? It's amazing how often when you get to this point with a client, they just don't know. They might have an idea what the key result is. We bought this to make more money or to sell more, to save money, save time, go faster, whatever. But then when you get to the point where it's, okay, but how will we know? What's the measurement? It's just extraordinarily common for customers to really get stuck on this point, okay? And both of these first two squares are really the heart of everything, right? And I said before, some customers come in and they know this stuff. Great. Guess what we know about those customers? They don't churn. And the reason they don't churn is because they know this stuff. They make key changes, they succeed, and then they renew. Well, the vast majority of our churn comes from customers who don't have clarity around this. And it's a surprisingly large portion of our clients. In fact, I think that's a universal theme across, every business context we've worked in, and that's quite a few now, is that the majority of your churn comes from customers who are not as sophisticated. They're not as advanced. They're not as careful in their thinking. They don't have as much resources. They're not as well organized. And this is one way that materializes. But in this sense, it condemns the whole venture to failure, because if they don't know precisely what this is for, so that it's important enough to motivate change, and they don't know how they're going to measure it and know if they've won, then the first key element is missing. So we've got to solve for this. Well, what if it's hard to measure? Well, I've got an example here that's relatively easy to measure, but lots of them are hard. What do you do in that situation? You find a proxy, you find an alternative, right? And it turns out customers are way more amenable. They're way more open to the idea of finding a good alternative way to measure it or proxy it than you might think. So if it is, I'm trying to produce and improve satisfaction in my engineering team, so we're buying this tool to make their life better, good. That is actually measurable. The fact that we're not measuring it doesn't mean it's not measurable. We can ask them how they're feeling. We can do a temperature check once a month, right? And I can put that into a database or into a spreadsheet or something. The point is, you have to know what matters, and then you have to know how we'll know when we've won. Those are the first two critical elements. And you notice on here, there's also this idea of a baseline. It's pointless to say we're going to improve a metric if we don't know from what, right? And sometimes that means we actually have to go. They don't know what their current rate is. They don't know what their current growth rate is or their current metric rate is. So we're going to have to go take that metric. We have to have that, or we won't know if we've won. And another thing is, if possible, what does success look like in the mind of the customer? Now, this one's really interesting, right? Because sometimes they don't know, and that's good. By the way, we can usually give them a sense. Well, you know what? Customers like you, 5% growth would actually be a real big win. Let's look at that, and then maybe we can go from there. But there's a lot of times, and I mean, I don't know if it's a lot, it happens enough that most of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with, when a customer has an idea and it's completely unrealistic. What do you do then? Right? They say, I want 500% growth. And okay, well, that's a problem, right? Because that's setting us up for failure later. If we agree to that, if we say, well, okay, but then they don't do the things that would be necessary to achieve that, or if it isn't even achievable in the context of their business use case, then we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment later. So I'd rather have the disappointment now. I'd rather have that conversation now. This is a great chance to say, wow, that's really ambitious. What makes you, think you're going to get there? We haven't seen that. Tell me more about how you're going to achieve that. And maybe they actually have a good answer to that, and then it'll be good you asked. And if not, then you say, hey, look, I love that idea. I think that's a great long-term goal, but let's set a more modest goal, because I think, based on what we've experienced, it looks more like something like this might do. Now, look, that may produce a little bit of disappointment with the client, but better now than then, because at that point it's unsolvable. That's when they say, yep, this was a failure, I'm leaving. So better now than then, right? And you'd be surprised how rarely it leads to churn to have that conversation now versus at the end. So you have to have it now. Okay, but fair enough. You're going to set this up. The next thing, we've got to know if they have the right solution. Most of the time they will. I understand that, but we do have to make sure that we're not going to go down this road promising those kind of results if they make key behavior changes, only to find later they didn't have a key piece of the solution in place. And maybe it's their subscription to you has all the right product elements in it, or maybe it's you have to have some companion product that isn't part of our solution, or some other data thing enabled in their environment. But whatever, those things have to be solved for. As much as we'd like to ignore them, they might have come in with the wrong subscription level, whatever. We have to solve problems now so that we can demonstrate value later. Okay, fair enough. The last piece then, and this is the punchline. This is the purpose of this whole thing, is to get customers to make key behavior changes. And everything to the left of this last square exists to motivate and clarify and contextualize why I'm going to tell you what you're going to have to do. And notice it's a short list. It can't be 100 things. Why? What if it is 10 things? Well, it can't be, because customers have a hard time changing. And in fact, in particular, the customers who struggle to succeed and who fail and will churn are the ones who have a hard time. So if it's 10 things, I'm going to parse out the first 3 right here, and I'm going to stage the rest for later, because we have to be able to step them into a process where they can actually succeed. Okay, that's all you do. Now, if you've done this even 2 or 3 times with a customer before, most of the details on here are going to be consistent from customer to customer, but there's variation, and that's why you still have to have this conversation. But the main reason you have the conversation is so they understand that this is what it's about and that this is what they'll have to do. And sometimes there's more rows on here, because sometimes it's 2 things customers are trying to achieve with your product. Maybe it's even 3, but I will tell you right now, if it's 2 or 3, it greatly complicates and therefore jeopardizes for less sophisticated customers their likelihood to succeed. So we want to keep this manageable. That's why there aren't 7 rows on this sheet, okay? If you are particularly in a complex business where you have gigantic multinational clients, enterprise clients who are your customers, we can talk a little bit about whether or not at the beginning of a really large 3-year project, you might have more than 3 or 4 of them. Fair enough, but for the vast majority of business contexts, 1 or 2, or at most 3 is really where you want to be, especially for customers that we keep talking about, the ones that are struggling, the ones that have a hard time. Okay, so you fill this out. This can be done. Honestly, you can have this conversation with a customer in a few minutes. Hey, what's the main thing you're trying to achieve? Oh, why is that important? Okay, I see. You're trying to, sell more stuff, so you want a bigger list size. Fair enough. How should we measure it? Do you have a metric for that? Or we're going to have to set something up? Okay, good. What's your expectation on what success looks like? Oh, wow. Here's where I would recommend you think in terms of this first year where you might want to be. Okay, good. Let's make sure you have all this stuff in place. Now, here's what you'll need to do, right? Here's some critical things. Now, think about this way. Those behaviors, remember, aren't just about adoption. They are about adoption, but they're not just about adoption. There are things customers have to do frequently that are beyond just the scope of adopting and using your solution, right? They might have to make a change in the way they process something or decision process they make, or something else beyond, right? Produce some new content or whatever. Those things that happen beyond the solution are still very, very important to identify, because those are key behaviors that they're going to trip over and fail, right? So we've got to identify the most important behaviors, and we've got to get them in here so that we can motivate that change. Okay, so that's essentially how you put something like this together. And honestly, doing one of these for every customer, I think, is a must. I like to say that you don't have to have a customer results strategy for every customer, just the ones you want to keep. Because honestly, fundamentally, this addresses the vast majority of the reason why customers fail and churn. particularly if you're dealing with customers who are less sophisticated and who tend to fail either in onboarding or in that first year where it never really takes off. This addresses that point of failure. And that early kind of failure, first year failure, that's actually the dominant theme in churn across all industries. We have a ton of data on this. The vast majority of churn is attributable to failure in the first, well, either in onboarding or in that first year. That's why this is so important. You establish this. The sooner you establish it, the more you're addressing that fundamental behavior. So does it have to be done at the beginning? Well, it's best to do it at the beginning. But if you have clients that have been with you for a year or two or more, I still find this incredibly effective, right? Because it picks up where we are now. What is the expectations about this? How do we think about, improving our results? And how do we as a vendor help our customers actually change how they work so that they can achieve those results? This thing is incredibly effective. And it's amazing how often people who try this out on a customer or two, and I recommend you do that. We're going to give you this form, these materials we're going to send to everyone who's participating today. When you try it, just try it on a customer. Just try the conversation. Start with a blank one. It's amazing how often customers will look at you and say, this is really helpful. This has clarified my view. I want to show this to my boss. This is so much more clear and so much more motivating now that I can see what this is all about and why we're doing this, right? And now they're going to pay attention when I say, okay, good. Here's one key or two key things you need to do that are really going to drive your results. Now they're paying attention. It's very engaging. Okay,
hey,
that's
Greg,
the customer results strategy.
Sorry, we've got one question I thought popped up was actually
great. Yeah,
great point here. It says this looks like it's to be used in customer success. How could we use this in other departments like sales or onboarding?
Oh, fantastic. Yes, it can be used in customer success, but actually we train even more people in our business. We train in sales to use this technique. So think about sales. We always imagine, right, there's this critical part, discovery, where we find out what's important to customers and we build our solution, our strategy around it. Think of this as an alternative to discovery. Now, in reality, it is discovery. I mean, what else would you be asking, right, in a discovery motion? But it's amazing how many times discovery motions get off track and they start talking about side topics or things that aren't related. And there's just a lack of discipline, frankly, in a lot of discovery sessions. This greatly sharpens sales discovery. You go in there and you say, hey, look, we need to make sure we're the right vendor for you. And by the way, that's actually where we developed this originally. It's incredibly effective as a front-end sales alignment tool. And discovery becomes, and one of the reasons I don't like the word discovery is it sounds like it's just me learning. But actually, the most effective discovery is where the client is learning, the prospect is hearing stuff, and their mind is sharpening, and they're coming to more clarity around what this is about, right? And this actually does that for them, where you say, hey, look, we need to know what's the key result, and we need to make sure it's one we produce. Okay, terrific. Yep, that's good. We're aligned. That's right. How are we going to measure it? How much will this be worth, right, if you can achieve this result? And here's what you'd have to do it. Now, the last piece, it's interesting. Salespeople have the most, I would say, hesitancy around the resulting behaviors. It's like, oh, I don't know if I want to, if it's too early or if it's not the right moment to explain to customers how, in a sense, hard it will be. Like they'll have to do these things, right? Make changes. But here's the thing. That's actually one of the most motivating pieces about this, because they talk to vendors all day long, right? People you're selling to, they talk to vendors all day long who tell them it's going to be super easy and they're going to get instant results. It's not credible. A vendor comes along and says, yeah, let's think carefully about the results. Let's make sure we're the right vendor for that. And then I'll tell you the expertise we've learned from working with the best, most effective companies, how you'll achieve that. Now they're hearing something they never hear, which is a vendor who's genuinely, carefully thinking through the whole thing and serious enough to tell you how you'll win. Because here's the thing, in sales, people think they're having the wrong conversation. They think that you're trying to convince the prospect that your stuff is successful, when in fact, that's not the conversation. The conversation that's going on is they're trying to figure out if they'll be successful. They believe your stuff is successful. They've seen other people win. They hear about it. It looks great. The question isn't whether your stuff is good. The question is whether they'll win with your stuff. And what you're really doing when you walk through this at the front end of a sales motion is that you're aligning them, first of all, to clarity about what this is really about and why it's super valuable. And then you're demonstrating, by walking them through those key behaviors, you're demonstrating that you're a serious partner that has all of the expertise necessary for them to get there, because they don't always believe they're going to get there. They've seen their company fail, try stuff and fail over and over again. When you do it this way, you build incredible amounts of authority and respect and appreciation for the fact that you're thinking about it carefully in the context of their business, and then you're showing them that we know how you can win. It's really, really effective for that. All right. Okay, good. So that's the first strategy. I'm going to drop that. You guys can pick that up from the email that you're all going to get, the key elements of this. Well, let's go to the next one. That measure materialized. I said, okay, we got to solve this first set of problems. It won't matter if the customer doesn't know they've won, right? We've got to figure out how to measure and materialize results so that they see them. Okay, what's the strategy? Why does that matter? Well, it turns out not only do customers that achieve results stay massively longer, it turns out they stay longer even if they don't achieve results. That's a shocking result, right? You think, well, obviously they'll stay because they got great results. It turns out customers will stay even if all you do is measure the results and they don't achieve very good results. Our data shows that customers who achieve marginal to no results, but are measuring them carefully, will still stay more than 2 times longer than customers who are not measuring, many of whom actually are achieving results, but the measurement's not there. So it turns out the measurement all by itself produces massively higher retention. So this is a simple playbook. This is a simple strategy. Start measuring your customers' results. Well, how do I do that? And in what context does that happen? Well, we already went through the process of deciding what mattered and how it would be measured, could be measured, hypothetically should be measured. The question is, how do I turn that into practice? How do I apply that, right? Okay, fair enough. Well, that has to be solved at the level of each customer. In many cases, our product actually measures the thing or has a really good proxy measure for the thing they care about. Fantastic. We've got that coming out of our system. The next question is, where do I show that? But in many other cases, they're measuring it. We need to figure out how they're going to get access to the measurement or how they'll share it with us so we can both look at it and optimize their results. Or it's something that has never been measured. And so we're going to have to figure it out. I use the example of they want to improve morale on one of their engineering teams. So we're going to have a call every month and I'm going to ask, how's the morale on the team? You know, thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. And then we're going to look back over the course of the year when we get to renewal and we're going to say, how did we do? You think, oh gosh, Greg, that's just too simple. That's too dumb. It can't really work. I promise you it's phenomenally effective, and for a good reason, actually. And the reason is that if it's important to them, right, and we're actually tracking it, we've already sent the signal that we're a serious vendor. We literally put you at the center, you, the customer. We think about what matters to you, and we're making sure we're so sincere about it that we actually want to measure it, whether it works or not. We actually want to know. That already puts you in a different class of vendor than any other vendor they're working with. And that's really important. Make no mistake, that sincerity builds trust. That's powerful. So what happens at the end of the year when they really didn't get very good results? Don't they churn? No, that's not actually what happens. Retention is extraordinarily high for customers who get to that point and haven't gotten good results. And the reason is because they're working with a vendor, and the calculus goes something like this. Well, I could leave this vendor and go work with one who doesn't actually bother to measure my results, has not talked to me about what matters to me, and hasn't tried to help me. Or I can stick with this vendor who's so serious about getting me the results that they're willing to measure them and reveal them even when they're terrible. And here's the other thing, and this is more important. What happens? What happens is they admit, we didn't make all the changes that you told us we'd have to do. So next year we will. It's amazing how often they'll retain. So do not minimize how effective just measuring what matters to the customer is. And then where do you materialize it? Well, the great opportunity, the key opportunity is in your business reviews, your quarterly business reviews. I don't know if you do them monthly, depends on how you've got it set up. Maybe it's once a year, twice a year. Some cases, it's quite often. So I'll just call them executive business reviews. And we have a very specific way to put this into your executive business review that's extremely simple. It has to do with this agenda. Have a simple business review agenda. Again, you'll get these slides. Simple. We're going to look at your strategy every time we meet. Then we're going to see, are the results good, bad, indifferent? Where are the results? And then we're going to agree what you'd have to do, well, both have to do to make them better. Very, very simple. We'll talk about what's next in a minute, because that's actually the third playbook. But okay, so it's a matter of, I recommend, if you're a CSM or an account manager or anyone in this role, the first thing you do in every business review is put this on the screen. Remember when we agreed this, 8 months ago, customer? Is this still relevant? Because guess what? It might change. Actually might, right? Okay, fair enough. And this is the moment to know that. Okay, based on this, here's how the results are. And look, this is just a sample. It's a simple idea, right? If you can reveal results, that's the next thing they have to see. And the sooner you get there, the more engagement you'll have from the executives. So here's a question someone's asking: any suggestions on how to do this at scale for small businesses? Yes, actually. And in fact, it can be done very effectively at scale. Here's how. You do need to figure out the one problem of how will we measure the most important result or two. We've got to figure out how to automate that piece, okay? And if you don't have time, if you have a programs team, right, one-to-many, whatever, or you have so many clients that you literally can't meet with them all, like let's say you're a CSM with 150 accounts, right? Then this can be done in an email. Make no mistake, the logic is the same. If I go back here, the logic is, what was the strategy? How are your results? What we have to do to win? Okay, so we have to automate the measurement piece to some degree, right? That can go out in an email or be spit out in the solution or whatever. The other piece that has to happen is we have to have their value prop. Now, this is where a lot of people get off track on this, which is, well, they could be anything. And the answer is no, not really. Not really. Your product doesn't do everything. It doesn't do anything. It does only a few things, which means there are only a few benefits you could ever really claim that your product actually produces measurably. And when you've done a few of these with real customers, what you discover is the themes get very, very consistent. I'm not saying there's no variation, but it tends to get fairly consistent, and you can consolidate which path they're on pretty well. So if you have an actual human touch point at the front end of a low touch customer motion, you can establish that strategy in 5 minutes and then put them on a track where the results that matter are from a short list of results that we spit out, and this can be done on an automated basis. If you have a human touch, but very low touch, do it once a year, right? It doesn't have to be a monthly check-in. It could be a once-a-year check-in or a twice-a-year check-in. Does it really work? Oh yeah, we do this all the time. Trust me. Find a way to scale this so that it can be more consistent and either more automated or done at a cadence that supports your lower touch motion. Absolutely does work. Some of those motions work surprisingly, shockingly well. Okay, so we review the strategy. I think the strategy, even in a low touch environment, needs to be checked in on with a human once a year. I really do. But there are motions I've seen where they've completely automated even that part, where customers respond to a survey and connect up and get clarity that way. But I would say that's the majority of cases. Most cases, it's best to have that human touch, establish the pathway, and then get them on that pathway. Okay, so now I've shown results. One of the things that's going to happen is they're either good, in which case I'm going to say, okay, here's what you can do next to improve them, and I'm going to write them down right here, right on the call. What you're going to do, customer, and what I'm going to do, CSM or vendor. If the results are bad, hey, did you ever make that change? Oh, you didn't? Okay, good. How can we get you back on track for that? And what can I do to support you? Let's make sure that that's your key action item. Either way, the key actions respond to what kind of results they have and drive better results. As long as that's the motion, it's amazing. Customers really respond to this. You think, wow, they're going to argue with me that it's our fault, or what? Actually, this resolves a lot of the arguments. This reduces a lot of the, I would say, confusion and contention. We're both aligned to getting you results. They know that I'm on their side of the table. I'm trying to make it happen. And so they're going to take my suggestions more seriously. And then when they don't get results, they're more likely to be open to the fact, or even straight up, in my experience, admit to the fact that they just didn't do all of it. And that's probably why they're not getting great results. And now we're on the same page. It's a lot less contentious. Very, very effective. Okay, we'll talk about what's next in a minute, but that's your simple, how do you measure? When do you present this? How do you get it in front of them? It's not enough even just to measure. They have to materialize it. They have to see it. Okay, that's the measure and materialize playbook. What about the what's next playbook? Well, it's kind of the same thing. If we've done all of that, if we've got a great strategy in place, they're getting results, we're measuring, materializing, will they still churn? Well, yeah, some of them will. By the way, the rate of churn at this point is pretty low, but it's not zero. And that's where the last big opportunity to drive down churn to greatly increase your retention comes at, is there a next, what's next, right? After a few years producing the same results, no matter how good they are, the thrill tends to fade a little bit. They tend to want to know what new thing. And by the way, in the meantime, their needs have changed. So we've got to find a way on some regular basis to produce better results or more results. And that can include expanding to more seats or more product options. But in some cases, it might just be not a paid expansion, just, hey, here's what you can do next year to get even better results. Here's some more behavior changes, some more techniques, et cetera. And look, obviously, if you're measuring results, you get better. But when we look at customers who got really good results and those continue to go up, they expand them, those customers stay 5 times longer than customers who never expanded. That expansion piece is a really important piece. And make no mistake, at the moment you're having the renewal call, it shouldn't sound like this. It shouldn't be, hey, we did really good this year. Do you want to renew? That's a bad renewal call. Here's a good renewal call. Wow, this year was awesome. I can't wait for what we've planned out for next year. Can we get started right now? Let's get you going on the new thing. See, I never even mentioned retention, because obviously they're going to retain if they're moving up, if they're doing something more, if there's something to look forward to. That's the right way to focus, the ultimate renewal conversation. Okay, so how do I implement that with customer results strategy? Well, there's 2 things. We could just improve, right? Here's more results, and here's new things you can do to get those more results. Or I can add a whole new type of result, different results, right? And in this case, maybe they're tackling one of those other long-term goals that they wanted to do, or maybe something new has come up. Fantastic. You can use your customer results strategy to take it to the next level. It's like, hey, here's our strategy for the next phase. Does this look right? Is this worth it? Do you want to go? Yes. Very, very, very effective way to do that. So think about it in terms like that. Okay, those are the 3 strategies. I don't want to spend too much more time on them, and there's more, in my written stuff, and also you'll get the email with guides on these. Let's get to some other questions. How about, or any questions so far as well?
There's one that's popped up a few times. Also, that's popped up in our LinkedIn threads and posts that I think is pretty relevant to what you've already talked about, which is, what are the most important elements of creating a health score or in predicting churn?
Okay, great. Yeah. Excellent. So the thing about health scores, it's really important to know customers are at risk as early as possible, right? Because we need time to save them. That's the big issue. By the time a customer is really in trouble, it's usually too late, right? The vast majority of them will not be rescued. And even the ones we rescue, we have data shows that they have a very poor retention rate. So they aren't really rescued. So health scores are extremely valuable if they predict risk in advance, but that's also the problem with health scores, is that actually a lot of things on health scores, some of them aren't even related to retention or risk. So satisfaction, for instance, does not predict risk at all. It doesn't predict churn at all. So those things should just be removed from health scores. Particularly, I would say remove satisfaction from your health score. It is not contributing to its predictive value at all. I've written about this. We have a huge data set on this. Trust me on this. The other side is, we have a lot of things in health scores that are really good correlates of churn, but they don't predict it in advance. In other words, they're lagging indicators. So like, for instance, if a customer stops using your solution, that's a pretty good sign that they're going to churn. But by the time they stop, it's actually too late to save them. That by definition is a lagging indicator. So we do need to look at our health scores, and we need to say which of the items on our health scores are irrelevant, remove those, which are lagging indicators, like the customer tells you they're leaving you or they're shopping for competitors. That's a good indicator. It's just that it's too late, right? And so those can stay on there, but what you really need to improve your health score are predictive or leading indicators. And what are leading indicators? Well, anything that tells me they're at risk before they even know they're at risk. That's what I want to know. I want to know the customer's going to fail before they do, because now I have the time to work on it. And the answer as to what's a leading indicator is in that strategy that I just shared, because we know that customers who get results do so because they change their behavior. That means that the behavior change is the leading indicator. So to the degree that's possible, you need to identify in your solution, in your offering, what are the critical 1, 2, 3 top behaviors that determine success, that if a customer does them, they're very likely to get results. And if they don't, they're almost certainly going to fail. Pick those out and track them. Find a way, in some way or other. If you have enterprise kind of high touch type motion, it's easier to do because I can systematically take the time to track them. On a lower touch scale environment, we need to find ways. Maybe there are hooks or implications in the software itself that can surface some of these, or maybe there are some other ways for us to track them more effectively at scale. But when you follow the key leading behaviors, those are the leading indicators, and those are really effective in your health score. What I would want, even maybe more than a health score, is just an indication as to what the client's falling down on. Those are the critical factors, because then I can just go knock them off. So not only does it tell me in advance they're in trouble, but it tells me exactly what to do about it. Right? Okay, so a customer doesn't have a result strategy. That means they're probably going to fail just for no other reason that they don't really know what they're doing and they don't know why. Well, let's solve that. Let's put a result strategy in place. Maybe the customer has to change a certain business process. If I can track that, then I can not only know they're failing long before they do, but I can also do something about it that's very specific. I don't have to get in there and wonder, what can I do to make this customer happy? No, solve that existing problem. Whether they're conscious of it or not, you're going to reduce churn. So that's what the critical thing in health scores is. What are the leading indicators and how can we track them systematically? Even one leading indicator is vastly more useful than 5 or 10 lagging indicators. Okay, what else?
Here's one. The next couple ones we'll pull from the Q&A here. How do you go about aligning go-to-market teams around churn?
Really, really great. Okay, so one of the things that we know is that fit, for instance, is a really big driver of churn. I mentioned that, right? One way to do that is to identify in your metrics a key indicator or two of fit, of whether a customer is a good fit, whether an account is a good fit for what you do. There's a lot into that, but suffice it to say, they're a fit as long as they're able to get the results, right? If they don't have the right business model or use case, et cetera, that's a problem. That's a fit problem. And one of the reasons that's a good place to start is that you can show your sales and marketing teams that those customers have an extremely high churn rate, right? And that helps them, I think, connect with the basic idea that, look, if we provide the same product and the same customer service to all our clients, why is there such a huge variation in success? Some, do really well and others fail and churn. That variation isn't an indication of our own variation. It's an indication of the variation in customers. And so if you can connect them to that idea, then they're open to other ideas, right? Where you can go beyond just the fit issue, but talk about some of those other leading indicators and factors that make a big difference. Because as long as the customers fit, then what we need to do is solve for why do they still fail. And when you implement like a customer results strategy, what we found is a lot of sales teams will see you doing it and they'll say, hey, what's that thing you're doing? That makes a difference. And of course, you'll end up being able, by the way, when you do customer result strategy, you'll end up being able to brag about it in other meetings where people are watching going, hey, that's really cool. Is there any reason I shouldn't be doing that in sales? No, there isn't any reason. You should do that in sales. That's a really effective. And then they start to borrow it. So one of the nice things I like is just to get your own house in order and start operating to this kind of results strategy, results mindset. It's amazing how often, even a marketing team will come in and say, hey, wow, those results strategies contain a lot of insight as to what matters to our customers. Can I borrow those? Can we look at those? And soon, and I've seen this over and over again. I think your experience, Matt, was also the same. You start to operate that way in CS, and people start to look at it. By the way, product also. Hey, what is that? Wow, that looks like that has a lot of insight as to which elements of the product and what value, et cetera. It's amazing how it starts to spread.
Yep, absolutely. Well, cool. One more from the Q&A chat here. What are the top CS metrics that help churn or adoption?
The top CS metrics. Well, when I'm running a CS team, when we're building out CS motions, one of the things that we really want to know is how many of our customers are engaging, right? And particularly with our activities around behavior change, right? And so as simple as it seems, I actually always track my CSMs on how many of their customers have engaged in a behavior change motion, right? We want them actually to be working on these critical behaviors. How many customers have engaged on that? How many customers have a validated customer results strategy? That's where you draft one up and the customer says, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. That means they validated it. Tracking the percent or share of customers who have a validated customer results strategy is an incredibly effective internal CS metric. It's amazing. And by the way, the thing about adoption is it's one example of behavior change, right? But there are other examples. Things like, well, the customer needs to set up their web environment to be able to work with this, or the customer needs content from their marketing team to be able to populate this. Those are all things that happen outside of the solution. There was a really great example with one of our clients years ago where they worked with dentists actually, and they found that dentists could get a lot better attendance, and that was one of the critical factors in their solution, was improving attendance for appointments. If they would put up a little sign that just said, hey, if you don't come to your appointment, if you don't cancel it in advance, we're going to charge you $25. There's something that greatly improved the customer results and had nothing to do with how they set up or use the technology. Well, the customers would hear that and they'd say, oh, wow, that shows that's important. Yes, it's important. It turns out that'll greatly improve your results. Okay, fair enough. I'll do that. So now we're in this unique position where, yeah, we're a vendor of some offering, but really what we're saying is, no, our core purpose is to make you successful. The solution we sell, the offering we have, makes you successful, but that's why we do it. But our fundamental reason is because we're here to make you successful. When you deliver that and you can identify other behaviors, right, that are critical to success, then you're going to need to do it. So another example is we had a client that was a marketing email automation company. But what we found was that the customers who were failing were the ones who wouldn't send out emails. And it turned out it's because they couldn't draft the content. They didn't have copywriters, or they didn't have pictures of their products, et cetera. So the failure wasn't in the system, it was outside. And so they started to work with their clients to be able to improve their ability to produce a copy for their emails and help them understand how to schedule their emails out over a marketing calendar. Those are all classic examples of the kind of behaviors that surround your solution, and you know they're out there, but we need to engage with those because those things really matter.
Love it. Well, we've had a few come in around behavior changes and the leading indicators on that side. And I think this question kind of summarizes a little bit. Can you give examples or an example of a behavior change that you can track?
Yeah. Well, the two I just gave an example of, actually, in both those cases, they were able to track. Were dentists putting up the sign, and if they weren't, it was a matter of running a play to make sure we contact those dentists and let them know they can improve their method that way. Or the second one, where we could see that the the customer had adopted the solution but hadn't sent out very many emails, and so it was a question of identifying that was a trackable metric, how many emails they send out. But then the key on that was, but why, right? Is that because you just never bothered to get around to it? No, that really was never the problem. It was that they didn't have, in the vast majority of cases, they didn't have the content to send out, or they didn't know when to send out. And so they developed two plays, right? The tracking was a matter of, are they using the system in this particular way? But the behavior change was, but we know really why. And so let's focus on those core behaviors, some of which are outside the system. So in this case, it was a proxy indicator, but we understood the background of what was driving that behavior. So the critical thing is, can you find something? Here's another example. It was one of our clients whose solution allowed them to improve training and adoption of technology in their client companies. And one of the best indicators that the client had really adopted it in a way that was going to produce change was that they had uploaded some of their own custom content, right? There's canned content in there, but the really successful customers were the ones who were putting in some of their own training content. And so they had a metric that popped out how many pieces of custom content had been put in there. And if it wasn't very many, then or none, actually, then they would engage with those clients because they understood that was a key behavior in ways that the client probably didn't understand. And also they had a play to help them, produce a little bit of content and start engaging in that particular behavior, which turned out to be a real good predictor of long-term retention. So there's a few examples. Hopefully those are helpful.
This might have to be our last question, and we've got 2.5 minutes here that I got to chat in. Net revenue retention or gross revenue retention, which is the best for a CS team?
Well, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just tell you the answer. It's gross. So net is really important because it combines two things, but that's also its failing. I actually want to track both things, but I want to track them separately so I understand which element is a factor. If I say net, what I'm doing is brushing over. I don't know whether we have phenomenal expansion and really crappy retention, or whether we have really good retention and crappy expansion. I don't like nets that way. I want them both as separate. So I want gross retention and I want gross expansion. And I want them both side by side because they both matter a lot. But then by having them separate, I can really see, here's where the opportunity to improve is, right? So if I have 96% dollar retention and 2%, expansion, that's just not like, I know that I need my opportunities on the expansion side and vice versa. So I don't like nets. I like two separate gross figures.
Perfect. We got 1.5 minutes left. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's joined. This has been a phenomenal session. We love all the questions that we get here. Please keep them coming. You know where to find Greg on LinkedIn. He posts daily questions on there. He is the expert in answering, and I'm sure we can twist his arm to answer these questions more. This session will be available to everyone, as well as what Greg said. We'll have some templates and guides that'll be emailed out to you today from the deck that Greg shared. Again, thank you, Greg, for sharing your expertise, and thanks for all the engagement, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, let's do it again. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, see ya.
Bye-bye.